In this video, I'm going to be showing how to line up your saw, align your saw. I'm going to skip the part where you align your blade with the miter slots because it's kind of difficult to do on this saw. You have to get up underneath and loosen the bolts and move the mechanism around. So you do that. Thankfully, that's already done on my saw. And each saw is going to be different in that regard. This type of saw here is known as a contractor saw, and that's generally the way you do it. You get in there underneath and you loosen those bolts and you move the thing over. And it can take a lot of time to do. And it's kind of a tedious process, but it's absolutely 100% critical for the operation of a table saw, for the safe operation of a table saw, and for the overall cut quality of the table saw. That blade has to be absolutely parallel to the miter slots. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take off this blade that I have on here because it's a smaller one. It's an 8.5, I think, 8.25. And I'm going to put a bigger saw blade on. It increases your accuracy of your measurements because you've got a longer distance to measure from. So I'm going to quickly do that, and I'll come back and I'll show you what I use to measure if my blade is parallel to the miter slots. With this bigger blade on, I'm going to wheel it up as high as I can without letting it hit the absolute stop. Some saws, including this one, can often change the way they're oriented if you come all the way up hard against the stop. Something happens in there, I guess maybe the mechanism twists slightly, and that'll happen on this type of a saw that's not really super heavy duty. So come up to the stop and then wheel it back just like a half a turn so that you're not butting up against that. I had a dedicated little gadget that I was using for this, and I made that a few years ago, and I've got a video on that. But instead, I'm going to use my feather board, which operates a lot, basically the same way. The only problem is it tightens in the miter slot as you tighten the screw here. But if I'm, just careful with that, just to snug that up, then I should be able to get it out or just push it forward so that I can make my measurement from the front to the back. Normally what I do is I just run it back and see if it's the same on the back here. Technically what you're actually supposed to do is rotate the blade back so that you have the same tooth registering at the back, and then you would slide your gadget back and make sure that you have the same thing there. And I have to get up actually and have a look, and I can see that it is just touching the tooth at the back as well. All right, so now that confirms that my blade is indeed lined up with my miter slot. This miter slot is parallel with this miter slot. These, table saws, even the cheaper ones, the 2 miter slots are, I think you can count on those to be parallel. So with that out of the way, I can check how parallel my fence is to the blade as well. And to do that, I'm just going to slide it over. This would be just a rough, first look until it's just touching the blade at the front here. And when I look at the back, I can see that it is just a very small amount out. So that I guess that over time, what has happened, something shifted here. And that's normal, even with, your store-bought saw with your high precision fence, it can move over time. Whenever you're cutting something, say it binds, it pushes the fence over, it can throw things out just a very small amount. And it's always a good idea to check the alignment of these things periodically, at least say once every 6 months, maybe a year. So to do this on my saw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the fence rail, because that's the way this is made, to bring it back in alignment with the blade. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my fence over, and I really should have done this before, and check in here and make sure that there's nothing in here. If there's debris inside here that's sticking to the T, or stuff that's sticking to the fence rail itself, that can throw off the alignment, and that's something that you should check on a daily basis anyway. So the fence is clean, the rail is clean, and I can proceed with lining this up. Once again, I'm going to bring it back so it's just touching the blade at the front tooth, and then I'm going to move it back like the thickness of a piece of paper actually, so that there's some clearance there. And what I'm going to do on this fence here, and this is the way you line this one up, is I'm going to loosen every one of the bolts that hold this rail in place tight to the L bracket underneath, except for one. I'm going to use that as the pivot point so that I can move the fence to adjust for the difference between the fence and the blade. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm moving it out so that it touches the blade at the back. And I'm just going to tighten this screw that's in front of me to lock it in that position. And then I'm going to readjust my fence again and have another look and see how it is. Make sure that I tighten it up. It looks good on the front. And when I come around here to the back, it looks good as well. I'm going to retighten the rest of the screws, put my insert back in place, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut to confirm my alignment. And basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting in part of the way at the front of the blade, and I'm going to use that kerf that I just made in that piece to measure it at the back as well. Now, to be certain, I could do the same thing on the other side of the blade, but I know from using this fence that everything, after it's in line like this, will be good on the other side as well. And this is the reason why you want your fence to be perfectly in line with the blade, so that you can use the fence on the other side and not run into any problems with it binding or burning or kicking back.